My key slid into the lock, but the deadbolt refused to give. I stood on the porch of the Victorian cottage I had restored with my own hands, confused. The door swung open before I could knock. My younger sister Alyssa stood in the frame. She was wearing my vintage silk robe and holding a massive ring light. She didn't look sorry. She looked annoyed. "You are ruining my shot, Haley," she sneered. "Mom said this is my content studio now. Go back to the condo." Then, she slammed the door in my face. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the wood until my knuckles bled. I didn't stand there and beg my younger sister to let me into my own home. That is what a victim does, and standing on that porch, staring at the closed door, I realized I was done playing the victim. I turned around and walked back to my car. My heels clicked against the pavement, a sharp, rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. I got in and closed the door. The silence inside the cabin was instant and total. The smell of cold leather usually calmed me, but tonight it just sharpened my focus. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but not from sadness. It was a cold, clarifying rage. It was the physical reaction to a sudden, absolute shift in reality. I stared at the house, my Victorian cottage, the one I had spent every weekend for 2 years restoring. I had sanded those floors. I had painted that siding. And now Alyssa was inside, probably setting up her ring light in the living room I had designed, wearing the silk robe I had bought with my first big bonus. The audacity wasn't just insulting, it was clarifying. It told me exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of this family. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource. I was a utility bill they could auto-pay and forget about. I pulled my phone out of my purse. The screen glowed bright in the dark car. I didn't call my father. I didn't text my mother to ask why. Asking why implies there is a misunderstanding, and I knew with crystal clarity that there was no misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover, so I responded in the only language a hostile takeover understands. I opened my banking app. Face ID recognized me instantly, logging me into the account that had been bleeding me dry for years. I scrolled down to the scheduled transfers. There it was set to go out on the 1st of the month, just like it had for the last 4 years. Transfer to Susan and Jeffrey. $3,500. The label read, "Condo Mortgage and Fees." I stared at the number. $3,500. Every single month. That was the price of their approval. That was the cost of keeping the peace. It was the rent I paid to be considered a good daughter. I tapped the transfer. A menu popped up. Edit, skip, cancel. My thumb hovered over Cancel Series. A warning box appeared on the screen, asking if I was sure I wanted to stop all future payments. I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I tapped yes. The little loading circle spun for a second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Just like that, the financial lifeline that had kept my parents in their luxury downtown lifestyle was severed. Next, I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Mom. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear her gaslight me about how I was being selfish or how Alyssa needed the space more because her career was visual. I hit block caller. Then I did the same for my father. And finally for Alyssa. I put the phone down on the passenger seat. The screen went black. It was done. The car engine purred to life, a low, steady rumble. I could have driven to the condo. Technically, that was where I was supposed to live now. That was the deal. But the thought of walking into that glass box in the sky, smelling their expensive perfume, seeing their status symbols on the walls, it made me nauseous. That condo wasn't a home. It was a cage they had tricked me into paying for. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going to the condo. I drove to the Hotel Monaco downtown. I needed neutral ground. I needed crisp, white sheets and room service and a door that locked from the inside, a door that I controlled. As I merged onto the highway, I didn't feel the crushing weight of heartbreak I expected. I felt lighter. The anger wasn't a fire that burned me. It was a fuel. They thought they had simply shuffled their assets around, moving the pawn to a different square. They didn't realize that the pawn had just quit the game. I wasn't their daughter tonight. I was a bank that had just initiated foreclosure proceedings. The hotel room was sterile and quiet, the exact opposite of the chaos I had just left behind. I ordered a club sandwich from room service not because I was hungry, but because I needed to perform the basic functions of being alive. I sat by the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there in one of those high-rise glass towers was the condo, the cage I had been paying for. I let my mind drift back to the day the trap was set. It was 4 years ago. My parents, Susan and Jeffrey, had invited me to brunch at a place where the mimosas cost $20. They looked tired. Not the kind of tired you get from hard work, but the kind of tired narcissists get when they are struggling to maintain a facade. My father sighed, looking at the menu like it was a court summons. "We need to downsize, Haley," he said. "Your mother's knees. The stairs in the condo are becoming a problem. And the stress of the upkeep. It's killing me." They spun a tale of failing health and the desperate need for a simpler life. They looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. They said they needed a garden. They needed peace. They needed my Victorian cottage. But there was a catch. There is always a catch with Susan and Jeffrey. They couldn't just sell the condo. "The market is down," my father lied, "and frankly, it would look bad. People would talk. They would think we're failing." In their world, the appearance of failure was worse than death. So, they proposed the swap. It was presented as a favor to me. A promotion. "You take the condo," my mother said, gripping my hand. "It suits you, Haley. It's professional. It's high status. You pay the mortgage and the fees, and we'll live in your cottage. It stays in the family. Everyone wins." I remember hesitating. I loved my cottage. I loved my garden. But then came the look. The look that said, "If you don't do this, you are killing us." I agreed. I didn't agree because it made financial sense. Any accountant would have slapped me. I traded a paid-off asset for a liability that cost $3,500 a month. I agreed because I had been paying the family tax my entire life. The family tax is the invisible cost of being the responsible one in a dysfunctional home. It started when I was 7, cleaning up the living room so Mom wouldn't yell. It continued when I was 16, staying home to study while they took Alyssa to Disney World because she needed a break. I was conditioned to believe that my role was to facilitate their comfort at the expense of my own. I thought paying their mortgage was just the latest installment of my duty. I thought I was buying their safety. I thought I was buying their love. I moved into the condo. The doorman looked down his nose at my Honda Civic. The HOA fees alone were more than my grocery budget. For 4 years, I ate instant noodles in a kitchen with marble countertops. I worked overtime to pay for a view I didn't even like. I convinced myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself I was saving the family legacy. But looking out at the city tonight, the fog lifted. It wasn't a legacy. It was a leech. They didn't want the cottage for their health. They wanted to live rent-free while I subsidized their image. They had turned their own daughter into a landlord who paid them rent. And the worst part, I had thanked them for the opportunity. I had thanked them for the privilege of carrying their debt. I took a bite of the sandwich. It tasted like cardboard. The family tax was due, and for the first time in 27 years I was refusing to pay. I wasn't just auditing their finances anymore. I was auditing our relationship, and I was about to find out that they were bankrupt in more ways than one. The silence lasted exactly 7 days. That is how long it takes for a missed mortgage payment to trigger a notification and for a notification to trigger a narcissist. I spent that week in a state of suspended animation, working remotely from the hotel eating room service and waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew it was coming. You don't cut off a parasite without the host reacting. On the morning of the 8th day, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. I had them all blocked. It was a notification from my voicemail provider, mailbox full. They had filled the entire digital tape in less than 12 hours. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, a cup of coffee in my hand, and prepared to listen. I didn't do this out of masochism. I did it for data collection. If I was going to war, I needed to know the enemy's strategy. I pressed play on the first message. It was my father, Jeffrey. His voice wasn't the smooth, charming baritone he used at dinner parties. It was high, tight, and wet with panic. "Haley, the bank just notified us of a non-payment. There must be a glitch with your app. Fix it immediately. We have a reputation with this lender." Message 2 an hour later. Jeffrey again. "You are blocking us. Are you insane? You can't just disappear. We had a deal. A verbal contract is binding, Haley. I will sue you. I swear to God I will drag you to court for breach of contract and emotional distress. You ungrateful little..." The message cut off. Message 3. My mother, Susan. Her voice was different, performative concern layered over venom. "Haley, sweetie, please pick up. Dad is having chest pains. Do you want to kill him over money? We know you're upset about the house, but we had to do what was best for Alyssa's brand. She needs the aesthetic. You understand, right? You've always been the practical one. Don't be spiteful. It's ugly. I listened to all 23 messages. Not once did they ask where I was. Not once did they ask if I had a place to sleep. They oscillated between threats of legal action and emotional blackmail. They weren't worried about their daughter. They were worried about their credit score. Then I made the mistake of opening Instagram. I used a burner account I kept for market research to check Alyssa's profile. She had posted a photo an hour ago. She was standing in my garden, wearing a white linen dress holding a basket of flowers that I had planted. She looked ethereal, glowing the perfect image of a cottage-core goddess. But it was the caption that turned my blood to ice. Finally home. So grateful my parents gifted me this sanctuary. This house needed a soul that appreciated beauty, not just utility. #new beginnings. #cottage life. #blessed. Below it, my mother had commented, "Finally, the house matches the resident." Stunning, darling. I stared at the screen. Utility. That was the word they used for me. I was the utility. I was the plumbing, the electricity, the mortgage payment. Alyssa was the art. They hadn't just stolen my house. They were rewriting its history in real time, erasing my sweat equity and replacing it with Alyssa's filtered narrative. Any lingering flicker of guilt I had, that tiny voice asking if I was being too harsh, was extinguished. They weren't just selfish. They were delusional. They honestly believed that my financial enslavement was their birthright. They believed they could insult me in public while demanding my money in private. I took a screenshot of the post. Then I took a screenshot of my mother's comment. I added them to a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. My father wanted to talk about contracts. Fine. I closed the laptop. The emotional part of this was over. It was time to get professional. I wasn't going to sue them for a breach of verbal contract. I was going to audit them, and I had a feeling that a forensic accountant would find a lot more than just a missed mortgage payment. I needed someone who saw the world in black and white, someone who understood that family wasn't a legal defense. I needed a shark. I found him on the 4th floor of a glass building downtown, just a few blocks from the condo I was refusing to visit. His name was Mr. Sterling, a real estate attorney with eyes like flint and a reputation for evicting squatters before they even unpacked. I sat in his office, a stack of papers on my lap. Bank statements. The deed to the cottage. The original mortgage documents for the condo. And screenshots, hundreds of them. Alyssa's posts, my mother's comments, the venomous texts. I laid them out on his mahogany desk like tarot cards. "Tell me what I'm looking at," Sterling said, leaning back in his chair. "You're looking at a bad investment," I said, my voice steady. "I was told I was investing in my family's stability. I was told I was paying a mortgage to keep my parents housed, but I think I've been investing in something else." Sterling picked up the bank statements. He scanned the recurring transfers, the dates, the amounts. Then he looked at the deed to the cottage. "This property, the Victorian, it's in your name." "Yes. Inherited from my aunt." "And the condo?" "In their names. I just pay the bills." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "And you have no written lease, no equity agreement, no contract stating that your payments purchase a share of the property?" "No," I said, feeling the familiar burn of shame. "They said we didn't need lawyers. They said we were family." "Right," Sterling said dryly. "The most expensive sentence in the English language." He tapped a pen against the desk. "Let's bring in a forensic accountant. If you've been paying $3,500 a month for 4 years, that's $168,000. Because if they were truly paying down the mortgage, they should have significant equity by now. And if they have equity, we can lean on it." The forensic accountant was a quiet woman named Elena. She worked fast. For 2 days, I sat in that conference room while she traced the digital paper trail. I watched my life turn into a spreadsheet. Every sacrifice I had made, the vacations I skipped, the clothes I didn't buy, the 401,000 contributions I minimized, was reduced to a line item. As I watched them work, something shifted in me. I stopped seeing Susan, Jeffrey, and Alyssa as my mother, father, and sister. I started seeing them as characters in a case study. I looked at Alyssa's Instagram feed again, not with hurt but with analysis. There was a photo of her in Paris last year, sponsored by Mom and Dad. The caption read, "There was a photo of her new BMW, birthday gift from the best parents ever." I did the math. My parents claimed they were broke. They claimed they needed to downsize because of health and stress, yet they were funding luxury trips and German cars. Then it hit me. The realization was so cold it made me shiver. Alyssa wasn't just spoiled. She was the product. My parents didn't love her more. They were invested in her. Alyssa was their trophy. She was the shiny object they showed to the world to prove they were successful. I was just the utility. I was the backstage crew keeping the lights on so the star could shine. They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me. You don't thank a light bulb for burning. You only notice it when it goes out. My anger transmuted into disgust. It wasn't jealousy. I didn't want to be Alyssa. I didn't want to be a doll kept in a box funded by stolen money. I wanted to be free. Haley Sterling called from the doorway. His face was grim. Elena found something. You need to see this. I walked back into the office. Elena had a document pulled up on the screen. It was a loan agreement from 4 years ago. The date was exactly 1 week before the swap. This isn't a mortgage statement, Elena said. I leaned closer. It's a HELOC, she said. A home equity line of credit. Your parents didn't just have a mortgage on the condo. 7 days before they convinced you to move in, they pulled out every cent of equity they had, $168,000. I stared at the number. It was almost exactly what I had paid them over the last 4 years. They stripped the condo of all its value, Sterling explained, his voice hard. They took the cash, then moved you in to pay the interest on the debt they just created. You weren't paying down a mortgage, Haley. You were servicing their lifestyle loan. The rooms spun. They hadn't just used me to pay their bills. They had pre-spent my money before I even agreed to the deal. They had bet against my future to fund their present. They had looked me in the eye, told me they were dying of stress, and then handed me the bill for the rope they used to tie me down. So I whispered the reality settling like concrete in my stomach. The condo is underwater. Completely, Sterling said. If you stop paying, the bank forecloses. There is no equity to save. It's a hollow shell. I looked at the screen. $168,000. The price of Alyssa's car. The price of her trips. The price of my parents' country club membership. They had laundered my hard work into their vanity. Okay, I said. My voice didn't shake. What do we do? Sterling smiled, a shark smelling blood. We stop playing defense. You stop paying the condo. Let the bank take it. It's not in your name. The foreclosure hits their credit, not yours. And as for the cottage, he picked up the deed. This is still yours. Legally, fully yours. They are guests who have overstayed their welcome. We don't ask them to leave. We evict them. Draw it up, I said. Evict them all. I didn't call them. I didn't send a warning text. I let the process server do his job. The bank sent the foreclosure notice for the condo on a Tuesday. The eviction notice for the cottage arrived on a Wednesday. It was a synchronized strike designed for maximum impact. On Thursday morning, I drove to the cottage. I parked across the street, hidden by the overgrown hedge I had been meaning to trim for years. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to witness the end of an era. A moving truck was already in the driveway. But it wasn't packing up neatly labeled boxes. It was chaos. My father, Jeffrey, was shouting into his phone, pacing the lawn. My mother, Susan, was sitting on the front steps crying into a tissue. And Alyssa was trying to live stream. I watched her hold up her phone, the ring light reflecting in her sunglasses. I could almost hear her caption, "Guys, you won't believe this injustice. We're being kicked out of our family home because of a clerical error. Send good vibes." Even in the face of ruin, she was performing. Then they saw me. I got out of my car. I was wearing a suit, the kind I wore for client presentations. I walked up the driveway, past the moving truck, past the weeping mother, past the shouting father. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Haley," my mother shrieked, scrambling to her feet. "Thank God. Tell them to stop. Tell the bank this is a mistake. You paid the mortgage." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the entitlement. She still expected me to fix it. She still thought I was the utility. "I stopped paying," I said, my voice cutting through the morning air like a knife. "Because I realized I wasn't paying a mortgage. I was paying for your lifestyle." My father lowered his phone. "What did you say?" I held up the folder I had brought with me. "I have the HELOC documents, Dad. I know about the $168,000 you pulled out. I know you spent it on Alyssa. I know the condo is underwater. And I know you lied to me." My father's face went from red to white. We were going to pay it back. It was an investment in Alyssa's future. She's going to be famous, Haley. She's going to take care of all of us. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. She's not going to take care of you. She can't even take care of herself. And neither can you. You can't do this, Alyssa screamed, finally dropping her phone. This is my content house. My followers love this aesthetic. You're ruining my brand. It's not your house, I said, stepping onto the porch. It never was. The deed is in my name. Always has been. You are trespassing. We're family, my mother wailed. How can you be so cruel? Cruelty, I asked. Cruelty is tricking your daughter into debt so you can play rich. Cruelty is locking her out of her own home. Cruelty is stealing her future to fund a fantasy. I looked at them huddled together in their misery. You wanted the luxury life. You can keep the debt that came with it. But you can't keep my house. I turned to the sheriff's deputy standing by the truck. Officer, I'd like them removed from the property now. No, my father shouted, lunging forward. You owe us. We raised you. The deputy stepped in, hand on his holster. Sir, back away. I watched as they were escorted to their cars. They loaded their designer luggage into Alyssa's BMW and my father's leased Mercedes. They looked like refugees from a high-end catalog displaced by their own greed. As they drove away, Alyssa tried to flip me off, but her window was rolled up. It was pathetic. It was perfect. I stood on the porch of my cottage. The silence returned. The birds were singing just like they used to. I looked out at the garden. The flowers were blooming despite the neglect. They had survived the invasion. And so had I. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. Alyssa's perfume still lingered in the hallway, a cloying scent of vanilla and desperation. I opened every window, letting the crisp air blow through the rooms, chasing away the ghosts of their entitlement. The first thing I did was hire a cleaning crew. I told them to scrub everything, walls, floors, baseboards. I wanted every trace of them gone. While they worked inside, I went into the garden. It was overgrown weeds choking the hydrangeas I had planted years ago. My father had promised to take care of it. Another lie. I put on my gloves and knelt in the dirt. Pulling weeds is meditative. It's violent and restorative all at once. With every yank, I felt lighter. I pulled up the neglect. I pulled up the resentment. I pulled up the years of being told I wasn't enough. As I worked, I thought about the concept of revenge. People think revenge is destruction. They think it's burning bridges and salting the earth. But looking at the fresh earth beneath my hands, I realized that true revenge is creation. It's taking the energy they tried to steal and using it to grow something they can never touch. My parents were living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. My father's credit was ruined by the foreclosure. My mother was apparently telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen their home, but the legal records told a different story. Alyssa had moved in with a friend, her content house dreams shattered. She had lost her backdrop, and without it, her online persona was crumbling. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a gardener who had finally pruned the dead branches so the tree could survive. A week later, the greenhouse arrived. I used the money I had saved, the money I would have sent them, to pay for it in cash. It was beautiful glass and steel, a sanctuary for delicate things that needed protection to thrive. As I arranged my seedlings on the shelves, I realized something profound. For years I had been trying to grow in soil that was poisoned. I had been trying to bloom in a family that only knew how to take. Now I was planting my own roots in my own soil. I stood back and looked at my work. The cottage was restored. The garden was breathing again. The greenhouse was full of life. I had built this. Me. The utility child. The one they thought was only good for paying bills. I pulled out my phone. I didn't check Alyssa's Instagram. I didn't unblock my parents. I opened my camera and took a photo of the greenhouse, the sun catching the glass, the vibrant green life inside. I posted it with a simple caption, Seed Sower. #New Beginnings, #My Sanctuary. Then I put the phone down and went back to work. The best revenge isn't watching them fall. It's not caring if they do, because you're too busy watching your own garden grow. If you've ever had to prune your own family tree to save your peace, share this story. You are not alone.